So I'm in Adobe Photoshop. I want to create a YouTube thumbnail. You go to File as usual, then New File. The dimension for a YouTube thumbnail, it's a 1280 by 720 pixels. Resolution 300. Let's create. So as you can see, you are able to move these panels. Just click anywhere and move it to a place where you are comfortable using it from. So let me just have mine there, and that will work good for me. So the first thing that we're going to do is maybe make a background for our thumbnail, add some images and text. So we just want to make it simple and eye-catching. So we can start by adding a shape so that we create a custom background. There are different ways in which you can change the background color. So you can see the background layer is locked. This means that it's not editable. So you can unlock it to enable editing, and you can change its color by number one, going to the effects panel. From the bottom here, you can see that we have layer style, a mask, we have new fill, new folder, a new layer, and the delete option. So to change the color of your background, you can either apply an effect to this layer, but if you come down here, you'll see this option for adding a layer style. So you can click on it and see maybe a color overlay, gradient overlay, pattern overlay, outer glow, and all that. So let's say we want to apply a color overlay. So click on this option at the bottom of the layers panel, layer style, and then go to something like color overlay. Yeah, a color overlay that will work. And once you're done, you can move to the right of this window where we have the color and select a color of your choice. Once done, you can click OK to confirm that. So you can see that those effects have been applied to our background layer. There's this effect sign, it shows the effects which have been applied. Let me undo that. Another way you can add a layer style quickly, instead of coming to the bottom of the layers panel, you can just double click at the right here to reveal our more options for adding effect or the layer style. And once you pick that, you can choose a pattern overlay, you can choose something like a color overlay or a gradient overlay. That is the another way that you can add color or a background color. So let's try a different thing. Let's create a new fill or adjustment layer. So from the bottom, you can see this option for create fill or adjustment layer. If you're not sure about a tool, just hover over it and Photoshop will give you a preview of the name and possibly what that tool does. So once we create this, we want to apply a solid color fill and hit OK. So you can see that this color fill, we can use it as our background or to change the color of our background. You can do away with your background layer and use this as a background, so it will be editable. Let's group it by pressing Ctrl G and naming this group background. Once done, you can hide the contents and you see we have a group for the background. To change the color of your background, reveal the contents by pressing that button, and where we have this color, if you double click on it, the color picker option appears, and then you are able to choose a different color for your background. So those are the two main ways which I use to change the background color, and I find them very efficient and easy to use. Let me let these people in. We've now changed the color of our background and we want to to proceed into making our YouTube thumbnail, well, let's assume that you want to draw a shape right here and maybe apply a kind of an horizontal line or a curve. So you can draw using the pen tool. From the tools panel, you can locate the pen tool. Below it, we have the freeform pen tool, curvature pen tool, add anchor point pen tool, but we want to use a pen tool. Make sure that you exercise with the pen tool. I think I will do a separate tutorial on mastering the pen tool. It's a very handy tool in design. It's so wide. You'll also be using it in Adobe Illustrator. So using this pen tool, I can just make a curve, something of that sort. Once done, that is a custom shape. I can select a fill. We said we have gradient fills, we have solid color fill. So let me try that gradient fill. So you can see that we have a gradient fill on this shape which we created using our pen tool, and then the background is visible. So let's add some text to this. Go to your typing tool, horizontal type tool, and then the title of this project is creating YouTube thumbnails. Creating, don't worry about my text. Let me just move it inside the canvas. You can duplicate it by holding down Alt key and then click and drag. Creating YouTube, select OK. Thumbnails. So that's it. We have our text, we have a custom shape with a gradient fill and a background layer. So it doesn't look so good yet, but you're going to fine tune that. Don't worry about it. So for now, we may be okay with this background color, but after adding the image, we might want to do a different design. Suppose we want to have our image placed in a circular manner or an oval thing or another custom shape, and then that image will fit in there. How do we do that? So first of all, you can choose to have your text on the left and then your image on the right, or your image on the right and then the text on the left. Let's create a custom shape where we're going to place our image, and here we're going to use a method that is calling a clipping mask. Let me just show you how it is done. From the tools panel, beneath the rectangle tool, if you click on it once, it's going to reveal the other tools which are in it, or just right click on it and select something like a rounded rectangle. If you use the rounded rectangle and draw anywhere in this canvas, you'll see that you created a rectangle, and then you can select the fill of the rounded rectangle, give it a color, and once done, you can round its edges by using these options. This is the option for rounding edges, okay, either of these. And because they are linked, if this sign appears, it means that when you change one, it's changing every other part, and you can see that effect taking place in all those edges. But if you want to do individual editing, you can break this link and then edit individual parts. But you don't want all that struggle over making adjustments to individual layers. Just keep it as it is, so that when you move one of them, the effect applies to all other layers, to all corners. Sorry about that. Once done, you can exit, and you see you have the text there and a custom shape. So let me just move these texts to the left just a little bit. So creating YouTube thumbnails. So we want to place an image here. We can make it bigger by pressing Ctrl T, hold down the Shift key and drag it outward to make it bigger, and click OK. So we're going to place an image, and then the image is going to take the shape of this rectangle. It could be too big, so we can reduce the size. You can make adjustments depending on your desired size. You choose the size that works best for you, of course. So we're going to place an embedded image. So we go to File, Place Embedded. So let's assume we are good with this image, and that is what we want to use for our thumbnail. So we're going to double click on it, and because it's a large file, it may take some seconds to be loaded into our canvas. Once done, you can move it to the side and click OK. So we want this image to be clipped to this shape. So if I reduce its opacity, you can control the opacity from this panel, and then just if you drag to the left, you will see that you're reducing the opacity. If you drag it to the right, you will see that you are adding the opacity. So we want to clip this image to this rounded rectangle so that the image takes the shape of that rectangle. Okay, so let's put it there. So how do we create a clipping mask? I'm going to show you the shortcut and then the long way. If you want to create a clipping mask using the shortcut, you hold down the Alt key and move this hand icon or tool towards the shape. So you can see that there's an arrow which appears. If you click on that, you'll see that the image has been clipped to that shape. Let me undo that. Press down the Alt key and move your pointer towards this shape. So in between them, you will see that shape appearing, a square and an arrow which is pointing down. So that means you're going to clip your image to that rounded rectangle. So select that and your image is clipped. Let's undo. Let's assume that you don't know that shortcut. Right click and move to create clipping mask. So once done, your image has been clipped to that object. Now the image is too big and you can't see the contents of the image, and maybe you want to make it smaller. How do you go about that? So press the Ctrl and T to enable the free transform. Hold down Shift to reduce this size uniformly, and then you will realize that we have a problem here. Okay, let me just finish reducing the size. I think I'm okay with that. So you can see that in the edges we have this black color, and maybe you don't want that to appear in your image. So there's a simple way you can fix this by matching the color of this shape to the color of that image so that people don't see that difference. Is a simple hack you can do. In other scenarios, you might have to duplicate your image layer and then apply some kind of blur to the layer which is below the one which you want to focus on. So let's adjust this image further. Maybe make it a little big or small. And let's say that we are good with that size. Okay, so we can select the two. With the first layer selected, hold down Ctrl and click on the second one so that you can select the two at once. Then press Ctrl and T to free transform them, and holding down Shift, you can drag it outside and make it bigger. That is if you want to enlarge both the image and the fill layer. I think I did it wrongly. Ctrl T to enable the free transform option. Hold down Shift and move it outwards and click OK. So there we have our image and the rounded rectangle. So click on one to deselect the two because it will distract you when editing. So let's assume that this image has some details which you want to remove. How do you go about that? For example, And the display, what is being displayed here, wearing a t-shirt that is named Mark Graphics Design Company, but it so happened that we rebranded our company to Mark Tech Design Hub. How do you remove unwanted parts in Adobe Photoshop? Because you may come across this. So the logo is the same, but the image, but the name changed. Okay, how do we remove that quickly? So right click on this layer and rasterize it. Go to your tools panel, and where we have this spot healing brush tool, you can see from the preview it removes marks and blemishes. Select on that spot healing brush tool, and anytime you're using a brush tool and instead of a rounded thing you have this thing which looks like a star, you will realize that your caps lock is on. So with caps lock off, that is how a brush should be. So anytime you use a brush and you can't see it, don't start to worry where what is happening to the brush. So you just click or on the caps lock to enable your brush in the roundish shape. That will work best for you instead of these lines, because you may not know the size of the brush. So if you open any brush tool or selection tool and you can't see that rounded thing, you just disable the caps lock. And then let's come here, let's say we don't want this name to be on our image, and then draw over it. So that is, and draw on the remaining parts. That's magic, right? And we have removed the unwanted part pretty easily without any struggle. So let me make the image smaller once more. And there we go. So we said we want the background of the image to match the background of this rounded rectangle. We said you double click on the rectangle and select this background color of the image and hit OK so that the two can match. So I'm almost satisfied with that. Let's move to creating YouTube thumbnails and do some editing on our text to make it stand out. Let's assume that you want to change this shape and move it to the other side. Maybe you don't want it here anymore. How do you go about that? You want to reflect it. So with this selected, go to edit and find the transform option. So you'll see you have the option to flip vertical, flip horizontal, or to rotate it. Okay, if we flip it vertical, you'll see that it has been kind of inverted vertically. Let's undo that. Go back to edit, transform, and if you flip it horizontally, you'll see that it has now been flipped to this side, and that is what we wanted. And maybe we can have it there at this corner. And so maybe you want it to also be above this image, you can move it towards the top of that image. So with this shape, I may not need the rounded rectangle anymore. So let me just come to the image and release this clipping mask so that I have the image as one object on its own without a clipping effect, because it may not work so well with a shape around it and then also having a clipping mask on it. So let's right click on this image and release the clipping mask so that you have the image alone. Go ahead and delete the rounded rectangle. So we only have this image. Let's make it slightly larger and move it to the side. That is almost perfect. We said there's a quick way of making a selection. Let me make this smaller. Okay, it's okay just as it is. So if you want to make a selection around the image, maybe you're not going to use a white background or a gray background, and it's most probably not going to match the background color of the image. So go ahead to the select option and select what? The subject. Wait for Photoshop to make the selection for you. So once that is done, we'll be able to make further adjustments to our image. Well, that is a good job there. It's almost perfect. You can go to any selection tool, right click on this and make a layer through a copy layer via copy, so that you still have the original image, maybe if you're considering to do some further editing. And let's move it to the side, and you'll see that we have an image with a background that has been selected nicely by the auto select feature in Adobe Photoshop. And maybe if you're not happy with the selection, you can go ahead and fine tune it as we did yesterday, and that will be awesome. So let's work on this text. Let's make it pop out. Let's make it big. You can choose any font. This is a primer. We can change it to a bold font and increase the size of that font. We want something that really draws the attention of people. So we want something that really pops out, and it will draw the attention of people. Many people don't even read the titles of your videos. They just want to see what you have written on your thumbnail. So that is a size 40. YouTube, let's also make it big. And thumbnails, let's make it big too. Creating YouTube thumbnails. So if a client has given you specification for the color and maybe something like the graphic elements to use in your thumbnail, you stick to that so that you deliver what the client has requested for. You can make that one bold and leave YouTube as it is. Creating YouTube thumbnails. Let's make some adjustments so that it doesn't look disorganized. We can center align this. And let's say maybe creating YouTube thumbnails is not specific. It's not something which somebody will read and understand what exactly that video is about. How about changing that to how to create YouTube thumbnails? Don't worry about the text. Control A to select all and then reduce the font size. There's a little typo here. YouTube thumbnails. So how to create YouTube thumbnails? Let's cut that out. Let's make this a little bit bigger. You can have YouTube in a separate layer. Just using the shortcuts for copy and paste. How to create YouTube thumbnails. And maybe we can have this S slightly beneath this layer so that the image doesn't look like something which is just floating there, okay? And then we also leaving out some space at the margins. So some little adjustments. You have to be keen and also fine-tune your work so well, so that when somebody sees it from a distance, they will be eager to know what your video is about. They'll be eager to watch that clip. So let's increase the size of this a little bit. How to create YouTube thumbnails. I'm not so happy with this, so I think I'll go to the first one, creating YouTube thumbnails, and then let's make it big. We can do a dark background. Instead of a gradient fill, we can go by a solid color fill. Choose something dark. As I said, the background doesn't have to be so bright, yeah, and all that. You can choose to do a bright one or a dark one. So let's go ahead and duplicate our text layers so that we apply the shape effects. Select all and Ctrl J to duplicate and hide the layers which will not be working with. So creating, we are going to right click on that and convert to shape. YouTube, right click, convert to shape, and the thumbnails, right click and convert to shape. As I said, you don't always have to convert your layers into shapes, but I'm just doing this for demonstration purpose. Maybe you might want to apply the effect I just displayed, whereby you don't have a fill or a stroke, but just an outer glow. So I have disabled the fill and disabled the stroke as well. Let me come and open the layer style menu and select outer glow from the bottom. Select the color of the glow. Maybe creating. Let's look for something brighter. Is it okay with that? Go to the second layer. We might want to apply the same effects, and I said if you want to apply similar effects, you just right click on the layer where your effects have been applied. You copy the layer style. Don't copy attributes, copy the layer style. Move to the desired layer, right click on it and paste layer style. If you still have trouble doing this, you can go back to yesterday's video and follow up on how to do that. So disable the fill, and there you have a text with an outer glow only, no fill, no stroke. For YouTube, we can leave it as it is or change it either way. So for this shape, let's double click on that gradient to edit it. Maybe we want to use this color, just doing it a little bit faster. We choose a different color so that we can get that contrast and the gradient can come out well. So let's work on these groupings, because you can see the text layers are in another group and we don't, in another folder, sorry, and we don't want that to happen. Let's move them and put them in a separate group and name that text. So we have the background and the text in different folders. For the images, you can group them to image and then the shape, you can group it and name it design. So let's go ahead and make some adjustments to this image. You can see that the selection is not so fine and you might want to change these. Okay, so we did that yesterday, but let's do it once more. Let's just bring it above the rest of the layers so that we can be able to see the edges. So you can quickly fix that by using the eraser tool. Reduce the size of your brush by using the left bracket and zoom in just so that you'll have a good view of it and avoid making those small mistakes during selections. And as I said, learn to release your brush time after time so that you don't make a very big selection which will mess you when you undo, because if you select a lot of parts, go erasing and then undo once, it will delete everything that you have done. So learn to release the brush time after time. Adjust the brush size according to the area of selection. So you're just doing a rough and quick one. So you can spend more time fine-tuning your edges to make sure that they look sharp and they don't have these serrated edges along them. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit. Well, let me just go by that because the image may not be seen from this, and we can make some further adjustments in the lighting. So if we go back to image, if we try auto tone, you'll see what Photoshop can do with the auto tone function. Image auto contrast, just see what Photoshop does with that. Image auto color, so it kind of matches the color of the image to the design, but then we don't want to do that. You can also choose a black and white, try different blending modes. That is depending on what you want to do and the kind of effect you want on your images. So let's assume you want a black and white. You can use a blending mode to create a black and white image, or go back to normal, and then to create a black and white you go to image, adjustments, black and white. Move that aside so that you can see what is happening to your image. If you hit OK and maybe you want to make some adjustments to that image, or maybe it's too bright, you can still go to image, your adjustments. You can also change your hue and saturation just so that you may control the appearance of your image. Just be patient with this so that you get the best, and hit OK. So that for me is a good sample thumbnail. We can move the image slightly further towards the right. Well, that is a good one, and that is actually the thumbnail we use for this video. So how do we export this. So if you zoom out to get a good view of it, you should zoom out, okay? And then you're able to see that at the edges of where we have the head region, it has those bright edges, and maybe you want to fix that. You can go ahead and fine-tune that selection further using your eraser tool so that it doesn't look that bad when somebody is viewing it in your channel. So just go ahead and fine-tune it a little bit to remove those shiny edges we saw. So this calls for a lot of patience when doing it, so that you get the best. So let's zoom out. I think I'm okay with that. You may still want to reduce the brightness of that image further. So image, adjustments, and then brightness and contrasts. Brightness, make some little bit of adjustments to the image contrasts. We don't want to overdo any of these effects, we just want it to be cool. You can choose what to do with this shape. Remember, we just used a pen tool to create this shape, and maybe you want to add your name. This shape will help you maybe also create some kind of draw some attention to it, but not so much. So let's say you want to add something like that font is too big. Let me bring it down. Let's say you want your name there. So that's me, Mark Mumangi. You can check out my social media handles. So that's where you want your name. You can adjust the opacity. It's kind of good. So you can have it there or on the left, right below you text, okay? It just depends upon you where you see it best. But mine, I think I'll just have it there. Let's go to saving our documents. Let's go to file and first of all save it as a Photoshop file. So save as, save on your computer. Select your desired folder and then you can name it as a YouTube thumbnail. Once saved as a PSD, you can save it as a PNG or export as a JPEG. If you want to save as a JPEG, you just go to File, Save As, save on your computer. And from this menu, this drop-down menu, you're going to select a JPEG. And with the JPEG, we hit OK once that is selected, and then we will be prompted to adjust the image quality. So you can choose the maximum possible. I said YouTube does not have a problem with image sizes for thumbnails. So you can see that the largest file is of course 319 kilobytes. That is too light, so you can go ahead and click OK. And if you preview that image, you'll see that we have a good thumbnail for your YouTube channel, which can be seen from far. And then from this color, somebody will know that you're teaching on how to create YouTube thumbnails. So that's it about YouTube thumbnails. I believe that you'll be able to practice this. So your assignment for today, go ahead and create 2 different YouTube thumbnails using your own image, an imaginary video or any of our previous videos, anything you've learned in Photoshop, just use it as a YouTube thumbnail. Create it. You can go to other YouTube channels and see what they have done and apply that. And maybe, sorry, before we conclude, you may realize that these letters are so squeezed. How do you fix that? If we hide that layer and bring back the creating layer and go to the character option, you'll see that you have different options here for setting maybe font size and all that. We want to set the tracking. That is, tracking is the space between characters. You can see with the effects applied, there is a lot of congestion and you don't want that to happen. Okay, so let's hide our shape layer. Let me move this panel a little bit. So that you can see it from the side. So what I'm going to do with my layer selected and in the character panel, I hope you can see this panel. So come here and adjust the spacing between your characters. So you can drag it to the right and increase it. And as I increase it, you can see that it's being affected in my fonts. So for example, if we go by 100, that can be good. So let's see how that looks. Let me duplicate that layer, convert it once more to a shape, and copy the effects which we applied in our previous layer and paste it in our new layer, paste layer style. Now it's a shape. You want to remove this fill. Go back to your shape tool, fill, and select no fill. So you can see that our characters are a little bit spaced out. There is space between them and the work is not congested. You can do the same for the other characters and you will have neat work. So remember to update your work. Control and S to save your work. You can go once more to save it as a JPEG. Let's save it because we've made changes. JPEG, and save it in the maximum possible size, and that will be good. Creating YouTube thumbnails, and there we have a good thumbnail for a YouTube video.